Welcome to the All Hearts on Deck Trillium Awakening sitting. And this is, the topic today is deep prayer, being the heart of the world. My name is Margit Bantowsky, and I'm a teacher for the Trillium Awakening path, which is a spiritual path devoted to the integration of consciousness, embodiment, and mutuality. I will begin today with a poem, then I will go into a presentation. There will be some journaling, so you may want to have a pen and paper handy. And if you're watching this as a recording, you may want to push pause during the journaling question to give yourself some time, and then reconnect with the video once you've done writing. After the journaling and a little more presentation, we'll go into a meditation on being the heart of the world. And we'll close at the end with another poem. So the poem that I want to start with today is by a man named Fred Lamotte. He wrote, he has 2 books of poems. I'm working from Wounded Bud today. He was a chaplain and professor at the Evergreen State College here in Olympia. He doesn't know it, but he is our resident mystic poet for the Trillium Olympia community here. Someday we'll meet him. But I'm going to start with a poem of his called Pain. Oh, I'm going to need to wear my glasses for this. Just take a moment to drink in these words. Pain by Fred Lamotte. Angels long to be born on earth, to feel this pain. Our distance is their breath, given for us to sigh. They only dream of this. We sense it as a mortal chest wound. They gaze into one waveless light. We have sunrise and sunset with oceans between us. They see a storm of brilliance in blue emptiness as they approach your beating heart. They watch over buds and cocoons. Where we swim in nectar, they see wings and flowers. And they envy us, not bitterly, but with their own celestial discontent and yearning for entanglements that can only be unraveled on earth. One petal unfolding in darkness here is better than 1,000 years in heaven. Therefore, we love. I'll say that one more time. One petal unfolding in darkness here is better than 1,000 years in heaven. Therefore, we love. So part of the exploration today is, you can form it in a question of what is prayer from an awakened perspective. And in Trillium, we use the word whole being realization to mean awakened. So what is prayer from a whole being realization perspective? That's sort of the arching question of this topic before the meditation. And I'll just give you a little background about myself. I was raised as an atheist, and the science in my family was the religion. It was the primary way to make meaning and understand the world. And any idea of God or spirit was completely nixed as a weakness in the human psyche. If you're religious or spiritual, it meant that you're weak. And my journey through engineering school and working as an environmental engineer for decades, was satisfying to some extent, but I got interested in psychology. There was a lot of things that weren't working in my life that science couldn't answer. So I went to school, graduate school in psychology, which was great. And then I realized there's some sort of a glass ceiling with psychology. It only takes you so far. And about, 2007, almost 10 years ago, things started unraveling for me pretty intensely. And I dropped more and more and more into mystery, the way in which science can't define what's really going on here, just deep mystery. Until I found Trillium Awakening, which was then called Waking Down. And that allowed me to take the momentum of my unraveling to the next step, which is the recognition of the unity of life and recognizing it's all one thing unfolding. And so this realization of one thing unfolding, the whole thing is one thing and I am that one thing. To me, that's how I would orient towards what I call spirituality and also reality. It's the most intimate experience of reality. And Dwayne Elgin has a beautiful way of putting it. He says, spirituality is intimacy with the living universe, intimate with ordinary reality and engaging it at its depths. So that's how I experience whole being realization. It's just this deep intimacy with reality. And with that intimacy comes the falling away of the illusion of control. There's a profound surrender at the heart of the whole being realization process, which involves letting go into the nature of this mystery, which reveals we don't have much control over anything. If we're lucky, maybe a little control over our minds. We can engage in tension, but we can't actually make something happen or prevent something from happening. Ultimately, reality has the final word. So along with this whole being realization is this profound humility of, wow, this is how things are. This is the reality of life. And inside me, I might have all these shoulds. Life should be this way or should not be this way. It should be like this and not like that. The energetic of fighting life is actually part of what falls away as we drop into this whole being realization on the Trillium path. And as we drop away from that fighting of life, that barrier of separation of me and that out there gets thinner and thinner until it dissolves and we recognize the non-separation, the way in which we're ultimately completely embedded in the matrix, the webbing in of the field of life itself. And that experience can actually be extremely vulnerable. There's this essential vulnerability at the core of whole being realization. And that essential vulnerability can be ecstatic. We have a teacher, Steve Boggs, who does a beautiful job of articulating the ecstatic nature of that fusion with life. And I recommend you see my most recent blog post on my website for that. It's Steve's essay on this. And so there can be this ecstasy of the miracle and the shimmering awe of the miracle of matter. And yet that skinlessness to the miracle also is a skinlessness to suffering. So as we awaken, we become much more permeable to the suffering in the world around us, suffering of others. What I do to someone else, I'm actually doing to myself. I'm not other. I mean, there's a way in which we're distinct, and there's a way in which I'm everything. So what I do to you, I do to me. So that interbeingness, this interpenetration of interbeing, that is the recognition of a deeper level of reality, creates a challenge to be in the world because of that exposure to suffering, the heartbreak of it. So I'm going to invite you to journal for a moment now. The question is, what does prayer mean to you from the perspective of non-separation and mystery? What does prayer mean to you from the perspective of non-separation, from the perspective of interbeing and mystery? That there's a way in which this whole life unfolding is actually quite unknowable in a way. So just take a few minutes to journal on that. Okay, wrapping up the writing. Go ahead and finish the sentence you're writing. So, non-separation is one of the key elements of what we call whole being realization. I like to look at this awakening as the intersection of two axes, two paradoxes that we are. One paradox I see as a vertical axis, the infinite dimension of self-consciousness. You can't put your finger on it, but it's the aspect, the ultimate subjectivity of self, the consciousness that is the infinite space in which everything arises. And also this dimensional, fleshy thing that I am. So that's one axis of paradox that I am. And we can have that recognition before what in Trillium we call whole being realization. We can have the consciousness realization that, oh yeah, I'm not just this body, but I'm also this infinite field of consciousness. And then the horizontal axis I see as the paradox of I'm me and I'm also everything else. I appear to be separate, and there's a way in which I am, and there's also a way in which I'm not separate. There's a way in which I'm deeply embedded in the web of life and part of the mosaic of the totality. So that intersection we could call whole being realization. And the dimension of non-separation, we can use the word mutuality to describe some of those characteristics. It's this interbeingness, the way in which I'm webbed into the same fabric as you. I am me, I am you. There's this paradox of mutuality there. And in that interbeingness, this relatedness to other on a very immediate and intimate existential level, what can naturally arise is compassion. So the awakening process demands a lot of compassion for the self. It's a pretty heroic journey and pretty challenging. And through compassion for the self, we can relax into what it means to be here and to be this here. And that compassion extends in mutuality, in the interbeing to others. So one way I can, look at prayer is allowing myself to feel the brokenheartedness, the interbeing, the mutuality, the intimacy with all of life, with others, feeling with the suffering of others can be seen as a form of prayer. That compassionate brokenheartedness is itself a way of praying. Letting ourselves have our hearts broken open is a way of praying. Another, flavor of prayer or element that can be woven into prayer is ritual, which is not something we talk about in Trillium much at all, but it was a big part of my graduate program in Meridian University in California. And ritual is the practice of delineating a space where the numinous can live, where mystery can live, where we can access our collective unconscious, where we can make things sacred. So interestingly enough, by loving the earth, by loving another person, by loving the creatures, by loving even our material things, it's a way of resacralizing life. I remember traveling in Bali, Indonesia, which is a Hindu culture, Hindu tradition. And when they got a new car, there were offerings on it and these beautiful flowers and hand-woven palm fronds and stuff. So simply by taking an object, I can even just use, this little iTunes gift card, and it can sit on the table as part of the other mess, or I can put it in a special place on an altar, and simply by having a conscious placement of it and appreciating or valuing or expressing gratitude or holding it in its more mysterious or sacred way, it can shift the energetic of it. So today we'll be doing a meditation, and in a way we're delineating the space and making it sacred. So ritual can be woven into prayer. Doesn't have to be, but it can be. And then, so we talked a little bit about mutuality, a little bit about ritual. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about consciousness, which is another petal of the Trillium path. So the subtle field of consciousness permeating everything. I'm going to go into a little scientific direction with it right now. There's the experiential knowing or intuition of consciousness, or recognition or realization of consciousness, or even sort of a felt sense that intuits the consciousness, and the qualitative experience of the unity of the one thing, of the whole thing. And it seems like science is sort of catching up with those mystical recognitions or spiritual recognitions, seeing that there's a fundamental field of energy and information. And let me get this book, hold on. There's an excellent book by David Nichol called Subtle Activism. And in this book, he researches, or he actually reviews all the research on consciousness and puts together a framework that argues that subtle forms of activism can be effective. And by that, he means like dropping into the field of consciousness with some intention and awareness can ripple out into the collective field. So there's a tremendous amount of empirical evidence at this point that consciousness is not reducible to a property of the human brain, but in fact may be a non-local phenomenon. So we tend to think of, here's my body, here's my brain, and consciousness only exists because I have a brain. It's an outgrowth of having a brain. But really, the science is showing us it might very well be the opposite, that consciousness is prior and primary to matter and a brain. Another way of putting it is matter is constituted by regions of space in which the field is extremely intense. The field is the only reality in this new physics. That's Einstein saying that. Another way that David Nichols puts it is consciousness must be fundamentally interwoven with reality at all levels. So that's what science is revealing, is that this quality of consciousness is actually permeates reality at all levels, that we just tend to be, what we are really is just a density, an intensity density of that fundamental field. And I was pretty skeptical, being a, engineer and scientist oriented person, pretty skeptical about, woo stuff and spiritual stuff. And I've had some experiences recently that kind of shatter that distancing. So I have a friend who picks up information from the field, so that the field is vast amounts of energy and information. This person, I would be writing them an email, and they would answer my question before I pushed send. They would send an email to me with the answer before I pushed send, because they could see what I was typing remotely. They are not a very good speller. So one time I was in a room with this person, they were across the room, and I had my laptop like this, and I typed in a complex word, and they didn't know the word, and they're not a good speller, and they just said, okay, here are the letters, C-A-C-O-P-H-O-N-Y, cacophony, what does that mean? And so this person is picking up information from the field in a way that we don't necessarily, accept in Western culture very easily. So taking that into prayer, there's the Maharishi effect, where they had transcendental meditation groups that dropped into consciousness with intention, and there were measurable reductions in war fatalities and injuries and increase in cooperation. This is all measured. You can go into the book and look at that. And the statistics are pretty convincing, less than 1 in a million trillion odds that those statistics would correlate. So from that perspective, we could say prayer is anchoring in a subtle field of consciousness with the intention for positive transformation. Another form of prayer could be anchoring in the subtle field of consciousness with intention for positive transformation. So just to offer those 3 kernels of ways of looking at prayer, that it's our heartbreak as we recognize deep interbeing in mutuality, especially upon whole being realization. the quality of ritual or sacralizing our relationship to things by loving them, making them more sacred. And then also prayer as a way of dropping into the collective field, the deep field, with some intention for well-being. And you don't have to believe any of this. I'm just offering those as possibility. It's just one way of looking at the web of life and the interaction between objective and subjective reality. I want you to discover what prayer means to you. So now we're going to go into a guided meditation, and let's just consider it an experiment. An experiment where we'll be doing all three things. We'll be creating a ritual space, an intentional space for the numinous. We'll be feeling the brokenheartedness and our love for the world, and engaging the subtle field of consciousness with intention. And by doing all of those, hopefully landing right smack dab in the heart of the world itself. So there's no right way, no wrong way. I'll make suggestions. You can accept them or ignore them, just trusting whatever arises for you. And if judgment arises, trust that. And, letting yourself follow the journey as I guide you. Okay, so now getting settled in your chair or wherever you're sitting, getting comfortable, go ahead and close your eyes. And take some deep breaths. And with each deep breath, surrendering a little bit more of your weight, your density, yourself into the chair or couch or bed, floor. Letting yourself be held, allowing the holding to hold you. And if there's a way you're still kind of holding yourself, with the next breath, releasing that just a little bit, the self-holding. Now noticing your hands, noticing what your hands feel like, how you might describe them, the temperature, the texture inside. And now, instead of observing and noticing your hands, I invite you to be inside your hands. Notice the difference between observing your hands and actually occupying your hands. And now go ahead and allow yourself to occupy your arms, your torso, your legs, your feet, your neck and head. So occupying fully the whole interior space of your body. So now I'm going to invite something that comes from a meditation process by Judith Blackstone. As you sit inside your whole body all at once, sense the space that's outside your body, the space in the room. Without leaving your body, sense the space around you. And notice that the space inside your body and the space outside your body is the same continuous space. It pervades you. Again, you don't have to leave your body in order to recognize the space. Just staying inside the body, noticing the space that pervades you, also pervades your body, same space. It also pervades the walls of the room. It pervades the house or building that you're in. The space that pervades you as you sit inside the temple of your body also pervades the whole world. And if the word space doesn't work, you can try the word stillness. The stillness that pervades you also pervades everything. Or the silence that pervades you pervades everything. So resting inside yourself and resting in that silence or space or stillness at the same time. Don't have to leave your body in order to make contact with the space that permeates everything. Now, bring your awareness to your heart and feel yourself deep in the center of your heart. As if you're living there, as if you're resting right in the core of your heart. And it may be even further back towards your spine than you realize. It's drop down and back so that you're sitting and resting inside your heart. And as you sit in your heart, softening your awareness and letting yourself sense the way in which your heart, you inside your heart, this place at the core of your being, how it is actually the center of the universe. Another way of putting it is from deep inside your heart, sensing the universe from there, the totality of it. So even though the universe is infinite in all directions, you're actually quite pinned. You're pinned into the center of your heart, which is the center of the whole thing. And now allowing your heart, the center of your being, the center of the universe, to connect with the other hearts in this circle. The other hearts who are showing up for this, either right now in the immediacy of this recording, or all the people in the world that are dropping in this way, that care. So letting yourself connect your heart to the others in this circle. And with that added boost of knowing you're not alone, that there are others, I invite you to start with just the immediacy of your closest circle of humans and possibly the animals in your life. Allowing your heart to register the suffering of those you love that are in your most immediate sphere of life. Your family, partners, closest friends, pets. Allowing the ballast of the connected hearts in the circle to give you the strength to register the suffering as much as you're willing and able to right now. Just letting your heart break open in the poignancy, the beauty and the pain of those that you love. And extending your circle a little wider now, letting your heart open to the next wider net of your relationships. So colleagues, people in groups that you're part of, more distant friends and relations, neighbors, people you encounter, and with the ballast of our shared heart, letting your heart and being register the suffering of that wider net. The various unfairnesses, the unexpected curveballs, the inevitable aging process, social structures that are unjust. And with the ballast of our shared connected hearts in this circle, casting your net even wider, opening your heart even wider to your bioregion, including the watersheds, the wildlife, the tiniest insects and the largest animals, the earth itself, the soil, and all the people in your bioregion that you don't know but share the space with you, the original people who used to live here, first peoples. So casting that net really wide in your bioregion. Allowing your heart to break. Allowing yourself to be in love. And let it register in your own heart, in your organism, in your wholeness. Noticing that the wholeness and the space or stillness or silence is vastly bigger than any of the heartbreak. Leaning into that vastness so that the heartbreak can deepen and widen. And finally casting the net all around the planet, wrapping the planet and all beings and all organisms and waters and soils and air in the web of your heart, feeling the strength and the connection of our shared circle, just widening your heart of the world to encompass the whole thing. The beauty, the horror, the awesome, unfathomable mystery of the evolution of the whole thing, the failings, the brilliance. And in this place of being the heart of the world, the heart of the universe, we'll just take a minute or two to allow a prayer to naturally emerge for you, just allowing it to bubble up. And it could be very specific. It could be a prayer for your dying parent, or it could be for the salmon that are running in the stream, or it could be the earth as a whole. So allowing your heart to find a prayer that can be as specific or as broad as it wants to be. And the prayer may be a word or a phrase or a sensation or an image or an energy, whatever it means to you to hold all of it in your heart, and perhaps very specific suffering in your heart. Letting your love be really reflected in that prayer. Now find some gratitude for yourself. Could be gratitude for your willingness to show up and hold the whole world in your heart, to be the heart of the world. In whatever way you can, Allow yourself to sense gratitude for life itself, for the whole mystery dancing, as messy as it is. The way in which the mess might even be ecstatic, even though it doesn't make sense. This aliveness and your heart at the center of all of this aliveness. And letting that gratitude and your prayer merge together. It's some sort of alchemy, your gratitude and the prayer that came for you. Letting those come together in alchemy. Okay. Taking some deep breaths. Giving thanks for wherever this meditation took you. Trusting wherever it took you. If you fell asleep, that's fine. Your system needed rest and your unconscious absorbed whatever it needed. In closing, I will read a final poem by our friend Fred Lamott. It's called Shatter. God meant to drop this mirror. God meant to drop this mirror, shattering into countless images. His perfect gaze, or her perfect gaze, I'd take your pick. That is why we meet in brokenness, fitting our pieces together again through each other's eyes, until we recognize one face with 8 billion reasons for astonishment. That is why we meet in brokenness, fitting our pieces together again through each other's eyes, until we recognize one face with 8 billion reasons for astonishment. So thank you for joining us. If you're curious about Trillium Awakening, you can check out trilliumawakening.org. If you want to learn more about my Awakened Activism work, just check out awakenedactivism.net. I also have an Awakened Activism YouTube channel. Thank you very much for your great heart